want to say that. November 8th, 2023 Chaska Planning Commission meeting. Liz, would you take a roll?
Aswa.
Here.
Campbell.
Here.
Gory. Kerber.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Purdy.
Here.
Urbanski.
Here.
And Chairperson Brass.
Here. With that, we'll move on to adopt the agenda. If someone like a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Urbanski and Baswa, I think is how that went down. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And then we'll move on to visitor presentation. This would be anybody in the audience or on Zoom that would like to speak to the Planning Commission for something not on the agenda tonight. Anybody online raising their hand? Nope. Okay, so we'll move on to approving the previous meeting minutes, the October 11th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting minutes. If they've been reviewed, would there be a motion to approve those? Commissioner Olson? There's a second?
Second.
Purdy, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, which goes to consent items, which there are none for tonight. And we go right into action items with 7A. And with that, I think, Ashley, if you'll take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Just a second here. Oops.
Is it not?
That's not.
No.
Push that over, actually.
That's so great for Purdy, but. Maybe we should have mentioned something before we started.
I could see fine.
I'll go ahead and get started while we continue to work through some technical difficulties. It'll be a filler, if you will. Tonight's item is the new public safety building located on the south side of Engler Boulevard, generally also west of the Engler Boulevard and County Road, Highway 41 intersection. The project is coming before you after reviews of the current police and fire facilities And those review findings that these spaces lacked sufficient staff, training, garage spaces, appropriate security measures, as well as health and wellness elements to keep emergency service personnel safe. Briefly, I'll give a history of the fire station and the police departments. Both of those histories are in more detail in your report this evening. The existing fire station was constructed in 1996, but it was not designed to accommodate the current duty crew model or heavy public usage. It was found that reconstruction of this building to address the programming and structural needs would ultimately end up with a larger footprint than a newly constructed building in order to accomplish similar goals. Likewise, the existing police station, which is currently located connected here to City Hall and the library. That facility was constructed in 1987 and is roughly 8,000 square feet. For just some perspective and context, when that building was constructed, there were 11 sworn officers. Now there are 31 sworn officers and an additional 9 support staff. This current facility lacks training space, property and evidence processing areas, and usable detention areas. So just a brief background of the project. This construction of this facility was an envisioned and identified as a needed project by the strategic plan originally adopted in 2021. And it was meant to meet growth needs as well as reflect community pride. The concept plan came before the Planning Commission and City Council in September. And ultimately, you as a commission, you asked questions related to the future 41 and Engler project, the amount of green space, screening, and overall park design. The park board then reviewed the project a week later at their meeting, and they encouraged access to the park be open as long as feasible during the construction process. And they also asked questions related to the implications of stormwater design and the overall park size. Finally, the council reviewed the concept plan at its meeting on September 18th and approved. Since then, the city did hold another open house on October 25th. Roughly 15 people attended that meeting and asked questions related again to park construction and phasing, screening and view sheds, and then financial questions just about the project costs as well as operational costs. So just a quick summary of where we are in the review process. Again, the concept plan wrapped up in September. We are currently in the pre-site and building design as well as the rezoning approval step. This step includes a more technical review than that initial concept plan, and it begins to resolve some of the outstanding questions and issues identified as part of that process. And then after this, it will move into the final site and building plan, and that's projected to happen in December. So it's anticipated you'll see that at your next meeting. The overall site, again, is 9.37 acres. There were 2 major wetlands identified as part of the project along the western side. The fire station property makes up roughly 6 acres of that overall 9. It's currently improved with a 23,000 square foot fire station. And but for a vegetated berm on the south side of that building, the site overall is relatively flat. The park property west of the fire station is improved with a playground and trail connections going to the northwest, west, and south sides of the site. Access to the fire station is from Engler Boulevard. Through the initial design process, those outermost access points were intended for public use, and that central wider access, again, for fire access for their apparatus. As currently proposed, the site would be regraded in order to accommodate a newly constructed building for both police and fire operations. The building would have a footprint of 64,000 square feet with an overall gross floor area of roughly 100,000 square feet. Access for the public as well as parking would be on the west side of the site. Fire crew and responders would utilize that western access as well, and then park on this northern parking area. And this allows for them immediate access into their emergency response deployment areas. Additional parking for duty crews would be on the south side of those apparatus bays. And that would allow for 33 designated parking spots and an additional 14 as proof of parking as the crew grows and their needs may change. In addition to the underground parking on the lower side of the police station, which I will talk about in just a moment here, there are an additional 43 surface stalls and 20 additional proof of parking stalls designated for police parking. The architect did work with our fire department to provide for an internal connection. This would allow for fire apparatus to circulate throughout the site without having to access onto Engler Boulevard to get back into their apparatus bays. The overall site again would be regraded to accommodate those site improvements, expand the stormwater pond on the southwest side of the site, and then create a 4-foot vegetated berm south of the building. As noted in your report, that park area is shown to be roughly 3 feet lower than the main entrance into the building. But as noted in your report, the final grading for that park will occur as part of the park programming process to come. There were several wetlands identified again as part of the project. There will be some minor grading on the east side of that northwest pond. Wetland. Incidental road ditch wetlands will be removed as part of the project. And then that pond on the southwest side would be expanded. So stormwater collected from the north side of the site, north and west sides of the site could be directed towards it. And then additional stormwater directed off-site. Generally landscaping is a mix of coniferous and deciduous, and it's shown around the perimeter of the buildings as well as the perimeter of the parking. This plan is sensitive to those future proof of parking areas to avoid future removals. As noted in your report, there is some vegetation that is programmed to be part of that future park design. The exact location of those trees is not shown in the plan, but that will come. And you'll also note that there was a small deficiency in the understory trees, and staff has been working with the architect and the landscape architect to resolve that. So you will see that resolution as part of your final site design next month. Moving into building design, northern elevation height is 28 to 39 feet, just kind of stepping up around those apparatus bays and again into that second story for the duty crews. The building then steps down to 23 feet on that southern elevation along those residential properties. Materials on the facade would generally contain the cream colored brick, representative Chaska brick. Remaining materials include glass, cast stone, metal, and composite wall panels. There are 2 areas of wall signage shown on that northern elevation, public safety in the northwest corner, and then fire station on the northern elevation. And then there are emblems shown in the clear overstory and some additional signage on the canopy on the western elevations. Internally to the building, shown on the screen is the main floor plan. The northern area is designated generally for the fire department and the southern area for the police departments. There is a second story above a portion of the fire station for training areas and duty crew living areas. And then under a portion of the police area is underground parking and additional storage. So to conclude my presentation, I'm just going to step through and summarize the staff analysis that was provided in your report for this evening. Ultimately, staff finds that the rezoning is appropriate as the uses are consistent with what's allowed in planned commercial districts. The plan is generally consistent with the concept plan that came before you last month. Subtle changes include the removal of the drive access west of the parking lot. That was eliminated to increase the amount of green space allowed for that park. Stormwater opportunities were further explored. There were suggestions that stormwater chambers may be contemplated as part of the projects. Those were ultimately removed due to installation and maintenance costs. And then finally, more information was provided just about that overall park to be further programmed in the future. Staff finds that the building is intuitively designed and the height is appropriate relative to neighborhood context. Code requires that 70% of the facade is class 1 materials, and all of the materials proposed for the facade would meet that requirement as noted in your report. Proposed exterior lighting generally meets the ordinance. Small revisions are required. There was a condition of approval and staff is working with the architect for resolution. And then finally, signage is generally compliant with what our ordinance would allow, and the final details of that would come as part of a sign permit review. For site design, the overall site design, grading, utility, and stormwater plans are reasonable and necessary for the project. The landscaping and berm would provide reasonable screening for those properties to the south. And pedestrian access is reasonable. And as noted, there was a small change for an inclusion of a sidewalk connection along the northern side of the property south of Engler to provide for additional looped pedestrian access. Parking does comply with city code requirements, and it's anticipated to also accommodate future anticipated operations of the site. And finally, the access was designed to separate public access from the emergency service response areas. Excuse me. Further exploration and conversation regarding that central access, as noted in your report, will continue to happen. Hopefully we'll have further information to share as part of the final site review. So just summarizing next steps for this plan, it'll go to the park board next week and city council the following week before again moving through the final site plan approval process, which would come back before you as the planning commission. So with that, Chair, staff is recommending approval, and I'm going to turn it back to you for any questions or discussion.
Thank you, Ashley. So back to the commission here. So it is a public hearing. We'll open it up to members in the audience, but first, if commission would have any questions for city staff or amongst ourselves, we discuss that now.
Actually, I have one question, and actually is probably your last point. So they changed the Western Drive. So now the police will be able to exit out of there or enter out of their secured area straight through a parking lot to get to Engler versus having a separate drive?
Chair and Commissioner, generally the police department would utilize the eastern access to both enter and exit the site. That western connection is just to allow for additional circulation, but it wouldn't be their primary access.
But last time we spoke that it was to be able to provide a secondary entrance and exit out in case of emergency. So I guess that's the part where now we're putting that potential going right through a parking lot, a public parking lot for that matter. Is that really the smartest thing we can do?
I think they changed the drive lane, right?
Yeah, I can.
Correct.
Right.
I
mean, I get the fact of, alleviating, creating more park space as well too, but, it's also the safety of the traffic that's going to be going through that parking lot as well.
Yep. So
I'll expand on that too. So just
ahead, yeah.
in terms of, is it like, what percentage would you say, to add on to his question?
the primary purpose on a typical day, 90% of the days, right, would be for that western access to be used for, as it pertains to the police department, primarily for officers to come and go as they're coming to start their shift or end their shift, right? So more of their civilian function, right? That western access, like Ashley said, would be used for the emergency response function.
Eastern.
I'm sorry, the eastern access, depending on which way you're facing. The eastern access. And so that's where, in working with the PD on the site design, when we proposed to remove that access that had been there before, that drive aisle, really with the goal of trying to maximize that park space, because that's been the primary comment from the surrounding residents. Trying to bridge those two things together. We saw that as an opportunity. The PD does not see this as a major concern, or really a concern at all, for the functions and how they tend to use the site. So that decision was made with them at the table, and they feel comfortable with where we're going.
Just to follow on there, I saw one of in the exhibit from the city and from staff, it showed the park size where it originally is right now, where it was a concept and where it is now. It actually is smaller now than what it was in concept. So if we made it bigger, how did the park get smaller? Even though we removed.
Commissioner, the architect may be able to elaborate on this as part of their presentation, but ultimately it was as the more information was provided about the stormwater chambers. Initially, it was contemplated again that some of that would be able to occur within underground chambers, but again, that part of the project was eliminated. It was shifted to stormwater pond treatment. And so there was, while that access again was intended to increase green space, some of that again was eaten up to accommodate stormwater.
Like I said, just kind of getting the clarification as to how it got to be. Thank you.
I wasn't here for the concept plan, but is there anything, I noticed in the report, I read through everything that talks about sustainable. Is there anything unique to this building, from sustainability to energy efficiency to green features type thing?
Chair and Commissioner, and I would defer that question to the architect. I know that they have incorporated some of that into their design.
Thank you.
I do have a question. Can you mention again the change on the pedestrian sidewalk on the north side?
Sure. Let me find a site plan that would be. So it included in it as a condition of approval was to provide. This is going to be a little bit difficult, but
That's fine.
To provide a connection just along that northern property line to allow for pedestrian access in an east to western.
Right, so they get past to over to like where the, what is it, Holiday and
security.
step by step and everything. Yep. Okay.
There are no sidewalks on the south side of Angler right now, correct?
Chair and Commissioner, that's one thing that we're still going to continue to look at is how that connection would happen or could happen in the future.
I can provide a little more on that. So part of this is that desire here is looking at the Angler improvements that are planned.
Yeah. Exactly.
And some of the changes to pedestrian facilities that will occur along with that project, and the objective along with that project to enhance connections from what currently exists. And so this is a link that we want to continue to explore. There's also some further exploration that's going to be happening with the access, primarily the access that serves the bays, the parking bays, and trying to see what the best configuration for that is going to be between now and final approval. So we want part of that conversation to include, potential and opportunities to provide that pedestrian connection to the extent possible. So if you think about adjacent west of this is an apartment complex, and there's neighborhoods west of there too, trying to facilitate the opportunity for folks to, on the south side of Angler, be able to walk to Holiday, or there's a dentist over there and other services. So that's the objective and the idea behind that
So
desire.
is that part of, would that be part of the county's enhancement of Angler to incorporate a sidewalk on the south side, or is that the city's?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, those pedestrian facilities as part of the Angler project are going to be the city's participation in that project, right? There's things that the county covers when it comes to the cost component. There's things that the city covers. Pedestrian facilities typically end up being a city cost.
Do they dictate like whether or not there should be a sidewalk and we just participate in the cost, or is it?
We're part of that conversation.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but you know, for this particular segment, I expect that the developer will build the sidewalk. I'm kidding. I mean, more than developer. With it all being one and the same, right? I mean, it ends up being a city thing. So yeah. Yeah.
So to bring it back, the reason why I asked initially was just because I know it kind of came up with the previous time, is the connection for people to get across. It's a little bit tricky, you know, in other cities and more dense urban areas certainly have this situation, but they have a sidewalk and you have emergency vehicles coming in and out, you got kids coming, you know, it's, how do you?
And that's been part of the conversation the whole time along. And in fact, you know, it's that's a driver as to why we're not seeing it. And I think up to this point, that's kind of how we've been thinking about it. But as we're continuing to develop the angular plans, we don't want to give up on the idea quite yet.
So it's still in play. Okay.
There's still bike paths and walking paths that go around the back, right, of the facility.
That exists now.
There are some connections that are much more circular.
It is surround.
I'm not getting that word right, but yeah, and then there's also the trail in the north. So this isn't an area that's completely absent pedestrian connections, but like I said, I think at a staff level, I know certainly I can speak for myself. I'm not quite ready to give up the ghost on this opportunity quite yet.
I've got one last question. It's just more of a clerical side of things, but since we started requiring the community meetings and the report back to us, I guess I'm kind of disappointed that it's only 3 or 4 bullet points. If 15 people showed up, I from my side of things, this was the opportunity for us to know what was asked and basically what that dialogue was, and we only got 4 bullet points.
Yeah, I attended the meeting. It was a pretty straightforward meeting, so it was just, there wasn't much more to reflect than what was reflected in the staff report. I mean, the meeting was about, I think, was an hour and a half. About an hour of it was presentation. There were only 15 people who showed up. It was about a 1-to-1 staff to person ratio. And you know, the summary that Ashley provided in her report is very much reflective of the nature of the comments. It's not a verbatim, right, of every single question that was asked, but those are the topics that were brought up. You know, that's what was discussed.
Overall, the receptiveness of the meeting was good.
My experience of the meeting was,
Your opinion?
yeah, it was that the folks who showed up, you know, there were some questions around budget and things. And, you know, the meeting sort of served a twofold purpose. One was to talk about, you know, where we're at with this public safety center project, but also to talk more broadly around the public buildings initiative that the city council is taking on as it pertains to this year's budget and going forward, right? So some of that is a little bit outside of the scope of what the planning commission reviews directly, right? But there were questions that had, you know, to do about, you know, how is this being paid for? Are we planning for the, you know, costs to be not only for the building of the site, but also the, you know, the build out of the interior and all the, you know, equipment and things that are going to be needed, maintenance, how is that going to happen to the building? We're planning for that, you know, and there's staff are able to give, you know, positive responses to all of those things. But then there were questions about, you know, the municipal service building and how that's going to work, and you know, some other things too that aren't necessarily directly related to this project. But my experience has been that by and large, the comments as it pertains to this facility has continued to, and it's been consistent throughout the process, revolve around the park and what's going to happen there, because the neighbors are, you know, that's what they use and that's what they're interested in. And also the screening, and for the people who are directly adjacent, you know, how is that view going to be impacted for them? And I think we've been working with them. Hopefully we're, moving in the right direction there. I think the screening that's being provided, like Ashley said in her report, is a reasonable strategy that's meeting the situation.
So can we add a condition that planning commission gets to tour the facility before it opens? It looks pretty cool. I think that this is one that I'd like to get the full tour.
I don't know that it would be added. As
I'm just kidding.
We can probably arrange that, yes.
You lose the key.
I think this would be one that'd be like really,
Lose a key.
this would be one that'd be really cool to like get to see, kidding around, but if are we good with questions here before I open it, or do we have any further, commission? Nope. Okay, so then at 7:35, I'll open up the public hearing. So anyone who'd like to approach the commission can do so now. No one out there? You guys are all just, okay, nope. Anyone on Zoom? Feel like I see someone or something.
Yeah, there's folks on Zoom, but no one's indicating
no one's
a
jumping
desire to
on.
speak.
We'll stage shy,
I'll
okay.
just go back to my original question if I can. To the architect.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We had an architectural question, I think.
So Rob, before we
Yes.
do that,
Yep,
you opened a public hearing.
I did.
Do you desire to close the public hearing before engaging with the
Well, would that be part of it? Technically, the architect?
typically?
No? Okay, then I would close the public hearing at 7:36. Thank you.
Sorry.
In trouble over here. You approach, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm Ken and Quinn Hudson with CNH Architects. Also with me tonight is another principal, Brooke Jacobson. And so if you like, I can jump right into some of the questions that have been asked, or if you have other ones as well.
Go ahead.
Sustainability was one that you were asking about. We definitely designed the building with sustainability in mind. It was one of the guiding principles that we had developed in the beginning of the project with city staff to proceed with. So there'll be a lot of things that are, really relevant for that. Things that we'll be looking at that are included at this point. First of all, I'll start outside. We're looking at using the stormwater from the pond for irrigation throughout the site. So we'll be recycling, that process. There will also be the landscaping that's being designed is a hardy and lower need landscape. That's also something that'll take less care over time for that. Beyond that, I think inside we have high R values throughout the facility, double thermally broken frames for the windows, high insulated argon windows, things like that. We also have high efficiency energy systems, so we are using as little energy as we can in modern technology. We're designing for potential for future solar panels on the roof, so that it's designed to accept that load and the connection of the electrical for that. Daylighting, you can see in the clear stories that show up in the images here, that we have 3 separate areas where we're bringing light into the center of the building, as well as, of course, a lot of windows around. So that can reduce energy usage as well as provide views and benefit the building itself. Well, other things that we would typically see specifically for public buildings like this would be low VOCs, indoor air quality improvements, including prohibiting any use of urea formaldehyde in the products in the building as well. So that's not necessarily everything, but those are certainly the idea, the scope of sustainable features we're incorporating.
I just look at it as if we're gonna, if we're trying to bring more of that type of thought process into the future with developers coming into our city, that we should be maybe set an example at.
It's probably an off the wall one, and only because it's a growing thing, but how is the design set up for the evolution of EV vehicles? So i.e. if the police force decides to switch over to more EV, how is the facility ready for that?
Sure, so we are providing conduit run out to pretty much every section of parking on the exterior. So that if charging stations are needed in the future, they can easily install them. The framework will be there, so they just have to run it back to the electrical room. And then we will also, on the inside, within the apparatus bays and the parking garage, have plenty of space available to account for electric vehicle charging in the future as well.
I think the other thing that is important to think about when we are is sizing the main electrical service for that extra load in the future, because that's something you don't easily replace just as you enter. So it definitely has capacity for that.
St. Paul's bringing on their first electric fire truck here in the next year or two, so. Not necessarily a believer in that yet.
Yeah.
You just don't want that
First
in the winter
vehicle.
time.
Yeah.
Batteries half
We'll
full.
see how it goes.
About half a block down.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Will there be a traffic light installed on the exit coming out of the fire station?
Yeah, so
Because that road is crazy. As you know,
Yep.
people don't stop, whether the
Yep.
fire truck coming or not.
That's part of the whole roundabout.
that's part of that. Yeah, that's part of the Engler project, and we're evaluating a number of different options as to, what exactly will happen out there. But yes, we are looking at different ways to, provide a warning system or, some sort of signalized system that would notify drivers that there's no emergency vehicle approaching. Exactly how that's going to play out, yet we're still working on it, but there will be something. And more likely than not, whatever that ends up being, we would look to have that connected to the Opticon system that's embedded in the emergency vehicles, so they can have that control and initiate that signal when they need to.
Some sort of like light or something that tells drivers that like emergency vehicle is leaving or coming.
Right. Correct.
Or flashing.
Correct. Yep. Whether it ends up being a enforceable traffic signal, right, that stops traffic, or whether it ends up being more of a warning system, those are some of the options that we're still trying to figure out. But there will be something.
Do we see that with final or would that be part of the Engler reconstruction project?
That would be, hopefully the things time out, so it's kind of almost one and the same. That's
We're
what
gonna see
we're hoping.
that soon.
Engler's gonna come along soon, yeah. So, but yes, I mean,
Somewhere on that.
whether it happens with this project or with Engler, that's kind of part of what we're figuring out too, is we understand the staging and phasing of that.
Staked out.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay, thank you.
It could be for all of you. So I know we talked about the police sharing the driveway on the west, but more specifically now on fire. I know that we've got 34 stalls that will be designated for fire, both on I'll say in the U and then in the front side on the north side of the building. How is the access? So I'm assuming those 14 or the parking stalls on the north side of the building are going to be able to access the facility quickly if they're trying to come in to an emergency. I'm trying to imagine the use of that west drive for both fire and police. And I'm guessing it's probably more likely that fire will use that to come into the station to be able to get to the trucks and go. I'm guessing. Please.
Are they on site now? Like,
There's some,
reporters,
but-
or some rush in still.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it just kind of understand that dynamic of how the fire is going to be done.
So the internal parking that's kind of in that U or C shape, that's where either the duty crew or the first to respond to the calls will go and park. It's more when there's kind of the all call or the larger volume that they need, they'll come and park in that northern area. But oftentimes they're coming in, parking, they're going in and waiting to get information on what they need to do versus responding right away.
Park on the north, so they wouldn't go down through they'd park most likely on the very
Yeah.
top part right there.
Yeah, if it's full on the back and they're not the kind of the ones that need to be first out, they could go in and park on that northern area.
How will they know? I guess like I said, I don't know enough of how the calls and how the timing is, but now we have two different parking lots for the same team trying to come to the same place. One's a primary, one's a secondary. How,
Yeah, I think,
Yeah,
I think it's fair to say that that would be part of the training process
Yeah.
for the fire, for the firefighters to understand, what sort of call, how they should respond. That's, that's part of that training. I think it's also important to note that the model of staffing is quickly changing in our fire department from purely on-call response. I mean, we are not a purely on-call response anymore. We've got duty crews that are on most of the time. There are times that there are not, so it is purely on call. But we are moving more and more towards that duty crew model where you've got folks who are actively stationed at the fire station for a shift, and they're staying there and they're ready to respond. And so most responses are able to be staffed and responded to with that duty crew without needing additional volunteer firefighters to come and respond. It's when you have an all call, and there are situations where that happens, where you end up having, those on-call firefighters responding. And so they're, coming to the station and needing a transition. And that's why we're building the fire station. It's part of what's driving the need, in fact, to rebuild the fire station, so that we have those facilities necessary for that duty crew model to be on 24/7. Although we're not there today, that's the future.
and just, I might have missed it. So the duty crew would be parking on the north or in the south parking lot?
I mean, the duty crew, I would imagine, is probably going to be more likely to be parking in the north parking lot, because they would be then stationed at the fire station for the extent of their.
Okay. I just want to make sure that
And then freeing up that on-call for that, what we're calling the C area, right?
Figure it out pretty quick.
They also,
After one
Yeah.
call.
I'd hope so.
Having been there, it's, and it's, they respond in 1 minute, another group comes in 2 minutes, another group 3 minutes, another one 5 minutes. So there's not a traffic jam trying to get in and out.
right, and not necessarily the jam. I'm thinking it's more of the,
Yeah, in the actual spaces, you can figure it out. Yeah.
also firefighter only parking and stuff like that, so. That's pretty typical of what other departments are doing as far as having, this is where the firefighters park that are on call type thing.
but that's the part where making sure it's clear to
Yeah.
everybody what the expectation of that is. So that,
And the good thing with the joint public safety police know that they're not gonna park where the firefighters have to come. They've got their own parking too, so.
I can add to that. I mean, this whole design process,
Mhm.
multiple representatives of our fire department, multiple representatives of our police department have been at the table the whole way through. And I mean, this facility has been designed at their lead, right? I mean, Quinn and Brooke have been fantastic translating their needs and desires and their input into the building design and the site design and everything that we're presenting here. They've been integrated into the process from before we even started with Brooke and Quinn, all the way through now, and they will continue to be throughout the process. So this is designed very.
Any further questions for the architect, please? So I don't have to make him stand there for the rest of the night.
It's like a great building, very nice.
It is a nice building.
Looking forward to seeing it.
Thank you. Any further questions for the staff? All right, well, we have a couple of things that we need to do. I would like to make a motion. We have two different things to tackle here, but first would be a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion for approval of the preliminary site and building plan, 285 Angler, the public safety facility, along with the 3 conditions, and I'd like to add a 4th condition to that, which is having a little more information regarding a warning sign for traffic coming on Engler that way.
Yeah, we can see what we can bring forward with the final approval.
I just want it noted somewhere on here so that we can,
Yeah,
Maybe just have them request that information, not tied to a condition.
would that work? Ashley suggesting, would it be sufficient to request that information and rather than tying it to a condition of approval? The concern I have is that design of those warning signs is really happening through a separate process, and that's the process that is designing the Engler improvements. That's outside of this planning review.
wouldn't there be some sort of power source coming from the building itself to?
No, not necessarily. No, that would be an independent system.
So if Angler wasn't getting redesigns, that wouldn't be a stipulation?
Well, if Engler wasn't, then it'd be easier for to tack it on to this, but since it is, that's gonna dominate or take precedent.
Correct.
So long as we're all on the same page here, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I am
Giving
too.
information about what's being proposed, and the kind of the status of that. But the unfortunate situation is that that's outside of the control and that's not within the scope of what we've charged, the design team for this building to do.
I was on a fire department once. We built a new station. We didn't do that.
Yeah,
Had to work for 3 years to put one in, so
right.
just trying to avoid it.
Yep. No, I understand where you're going there.
Do we need to retract that motion and say it again with just the 3 conditions, or can we just,
Track the 4th condition.
okay,
There you go.
we have a second?
I'll second.
First Urbanski, second Purdy, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the rezoning of the property at 285 Angler Boulevard, Fire Station property from P2 Public Buildings to PCD Planned Commercial District and rezoning of the adjacent unaddressed property Meadow Park from PMD 03 Planned Multi-Use Development District to PCD Planned Commercial District. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Boswell, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I think that is it for our action items. With that, we'll move into other business. Doesn't seem to be any other business. Receive other minutes. So with that, we'll receive the city council meeting minutes and the EDA meeting minutes. They are so well received. And then we have adjournment. So prior to that, is there any other further conversation for city staff? Anything anyone wants to bring up?
Make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
Downtown looks great.
Good job, Ashley.
Downtown, yeah.
It looks nice.
Awesome job.
Quite impressive.
Is there a motion to adjourn? Vansky, a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned.